All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Russo. I'm the CEO of the Palm Beach Tech Association, joining you live from my living room. We are delighted to have with you guys another tech talk from one of the top tech leaders that we can find in our membership. So we're going to be joined today by Enterprise Security Director from Crown Castle, Mr. Rob Andrews. I'm going to really quick give an introduction. If you guys have not seen our tech talks before, this is usually an in-person event, but now we are all virtual all the time. So I'll really quick give a few quick slides of presentation. So our topic today is going to be threat intelligence in a rapidly changing environment. Threat intelligence, of course, is understanding really what the threats are out there. Anybody who has a computer in the 21st century is a potential threat who can hack you. So Rob's going to be going a little bit in depth there. For those that don't know, our mission is to build South Florida into a tech hub. We are a nonprofit organization. We have members across South Florida from Palm Beach, Martin, Broward, Miami-Dade counties. So we are definitely a large organization than just Palm Beach right now. And we have just over 165 members today, including some really great companies that like Office Depot and FPL. With that, we do some work with a lot of these companies, and most notably, I think of recent, Total Wine has a development office here in South Florida, and they've been working on doing a lot of their online deliveries now that COVID-19 has become, force the on-demand economy. With that, we also have a number of memberships that range from $500 to $5,000 for companies looking to get more engaged and involved in the community and looking to hire talent, looking to build their business. You can find out more about that on palmbeachtech.org. But with that, lucky to have Rob. He's actually joining us today from Pittsburgh. Crown Castle Fiber is one of our premier members, and they have a fiber network that stretches really across the United States and in many parts now. But they have been a really great part of our organization, and Rob's going to dive in a little bit more on his topic today. But thank you so much for taking the time and for joining us.
Sounds good. Thank you. Appreciate the time today, Joe. Go ahead and share out my screen. Let me know if that's popping up or not. How's that look?
Looks good.
Okay. I'll go ahead and get it into presentation mode there. So my name is Rob Andrews. I am the Director of Information Security and Enterprise Security at Crown Castle. From the standpoint of protecting infrastructure and protecting our networks, we do quite a bit of work in the threat intelligence space. So I hope to bring some of those experiences with you. I also, in a past life, before I came to Crown Castle and when I was out consulting, did about 8 years of instruction in network forensics at the National Computer Forensics Institute in Hoover, Alabama. And in that facility, I was able to work with state and local law enforcement officials from around the country and train and work alongside Secret Service agents from around the country as well. So hope to bring some of those experiences to the talk today. Hopefully the talk is lively. I'm used to doing these things live, so I'm actually in my office at home, just like everybody else probably is right now, and excited to share this with you. So I'm anxious for the questions at the end to see if you have any, and it'll be a little different, not be interactive, but we'll do our best to get through it. So I think the first thing I like to do when we start to talk about threat intelligence or any other topic that we talk about is really define it and really try to understand what we're going to be talking about and where some of the similarities are between your knowledge, my knowledge, what might be out there on the internet floating around, what you may have researched. But when I'm talking about threat intelligence, I'm talking about the information that is used to understand everything in and around you. That's your past, your current state, your future state, the threats that are on the way. it's really taking a holistic view of what's going on from a network perspective and a threat perspective within your individual environments. That could be a very small environment, it could be a large environment. But the bottom line is we're trying to place some context around what's actually happening and where we might want to go with some of the defenses that we may put into place, or some of the incident response that we may have to take in order to lock something down that may be under attack. So we're going to be asking a lot of questions of our threat intelligence and try to get some very specific information on it. And it's really going to sound like a cliche, but it's true. It's the who, what, why, when, and where kind of questions that you're asking. So who's attacking us? What are they after? What's the particular vulnerability that this attack is moving toward and trying to get access to? Why are they attacking us? Is there a reason? Is it because we are a part of an organization that is particularly vulnerable? Is it a part of an organization that has particular data types that somebody would want to get access to? Why are we being attacked? And then why are the attackers attacking in the first place? When might the attack take place? This is critical. And one of the things that we all often try to figure out is, are there going to be certain time periods when an attack may happen? A lot of folks may think, hey, that attack might happen in the wee hours of the morning. But in reality, time and when you're looking at the clock, it really doesn't have a space any longer as far as the attack landscape is concerned. And the timing might be very specific to the attacker, maybe very specific to you as an organization. So figuring out that time window and how that might be effective to you is critical. And then how much damage can be done? What happens if an attack is realized, if an exploit is able to be acted upon against a vulnerability that we have in our systems, in our network, in our people, et cetera? And so we have to really understand what the scope of that damage might be and how much information we may lose, what the system damage might be, what the monetary damage might be, what the reputational damage might be, and so forth. So it's really asking all those questions, and that gives us a very good idea of what our threat intelligence looks like. It really gives us an idea of where we want to place some of our resources and really place some of our money and our time and effort. Overall, as we're taking a look at the threat intelligence, it gives us a chance to mitigate our cybersecurity risks. And that's something that we talk about on a very regular basis, and I'll mention that a couple different times throughout the presentation. So what is our cybersecurity risk? I think there's a lot of different ways that you can define risk. And I think if you're in financials or if you're in healthcare or in a lot of different verticals, you may have a slightly different answer. What I'm talking about when we get to cybersecurity risk is the probability of exposure or loss due to a cyber attack or data breach of some sort. And when I really think about cyber risks, and I'm talking to my senior leadership about the risks for our organization, a lot of times I'm mentioning these terms, the threat. What is the intent and the capability of the people that are out there trying to attack us? Why are they coming again? And again, those questions, who, what, when, where, why? Who are they? What are they coming after? What are their capabilities? Are they really good at attacking folks, or is this maybe a very unsophisticated attack? So we're taking a look at all of those different parameters when we're dealing with the threat. We take a look at our vulnerabilities, and this is a very hard thing for some organizations to do, because you don't want to think that you've got vulnerabilities, especially if you're the security team or if you're the team that's in charge of putting your security controls into place. But everybody's got vulnerabilities, and you have to come to that realization that you're going to have to find a way to take either care of those vulnerabilities and fix them, or you're going to have to put yourself in a position where you can watch after those vulnerabilities and make sure something doesn't act upon them. Everybody's got them. It's tough to talk about them, but you've got to be very realistic about those vulnerabilities. And then, of course, the impact. If one of those vulnerabilities end up getting exploited or acted upon, how does that affect us? And so as we're dealing with threat intelligence, we're really taking a look at all of these different components as far as how they apply to our risk and how we might be able to then mitigate that particular risk by the information that we're able to gain. Now, there is, from a terminology standpoint, there can be a gap in really understanding when we're talking about threat intelligence. Some people will think it's data, some think it's info, some people think it's intel, all the way around. But let's get some of the terminology here straight. And from the standpoint of the way I would describe threat intelligence, I look at data as a collection. It's the things that we go out and collect across our network. It's our data sources. So data could be coming from our firewall, and that's raw data that's coming in. It could be coming from our intrusion detection systems. It could be something that we're picking up a list of IP addresses. It could be logs or scans that we do from a vulnerability standpoint. But really, our data is the raw data that's coming in, and ultimately, we want to turn that into threat intelligence, and we want to try to understand what's going on with it. But it always starts with that raw component. It's a grouping of data points, multiple sources from all over the place that we're going to try and pull together and ultimately start to do some work on to make some sense of it. The first step along that way in making sense of the data is turning it into true information. And that's when you first start processing that raw data. And that's where you're bringing that data maybe into a correlation engine or another type of tool that allows you to sift through that data, start to show some patterns, start to do some more automated identification of potential threats or some key things that you might want to take a look at. You're really dealing with those patterns or those trends, and that intelligence is going to be developed from some of those trends and those patterns and those alerts, those notable items that will pop up and bring your attention or draw your attention straight to them. And at the end of the process here is the intelligence. And your intelligence is going to be a little different than my intelligence, which is going to be a little different from somebody else's. Yeah, the threats may be similar or even exactly the same, but the way that threat may act upon your organization could be completely different than it would act upon mine. And so you take the information that you've pulled together, and that's when you start to analyze it. You grab that information, and then you start to understand, well, if that threat is going to go after a specific system on my network, well, I don't have that specific system. And so that threat can come in all day long. We don't want it to come in and bounce around the network, but if it's trying to hit a specific type of machine and I don't have that specific type of machine or that OS or that application, then I may not have to worry about it as much as somebody else might have to. And as we start to pull all of those pieces together and we really get into that deep analysis of the data that we've got and all the different data points that are important to us here, that's when we can start developing a strategy to figure out how we're going to go attack this problem. Do we just stop it at the firewall and don't allow that traffic to come through anymore? Or do we really have to act even further because there are some specific vulnerabilities across the network? So you're going to start with raw data, start processing it down through, and then ultimately getting to that point where you have some true actionable intelligence to take a look at. And then you can start to working across your environment to make sure that nothing happens that, well, you don't want to happen. So the threat intelligence cycle, as you start to take a look at all the different things that you're going to get in your threat intelligence. So once you've got your data and you're processing it, you get information, you've got your threat intelligence. Well, there's a true cycle here at work, and it's really important that you're looking into the different pieces of this cycle and really understanding how they fit together and what you want to do on each step, because if you miss something here, you might not be getting the full story of all the data that you've got. So the first thing is planning and direction. Figure out what data points you need to bring into play. If you can figure out what data points you want to bring into play, you're going to be much better off all the way around in getting all of the information together the right way, getting that threat intelligence that is going to be very meaningful for you. The bottom line is that you need to look across your entire organization to understand all the different sources of data that you might have. And we're going to talk some sources here in a minute or two that are going to be important, but understand what you have access to, understand what you might be able to get, and then start collecting it. So once you leave the planning and direction phase and you know what you're going to go after, you start collecting that data. And the collection of the data is kind of twofold. The first thing is you got to start getting data out of those individual systems or from those data sources that you want. The very important part of just getting the data and making sure that data is flowing is really key to the process. But the second part is even more important. As you're collecting the data, making sure you have quality data to take a look at. It's one thing to be streaming data from your firewall, but it's quite another thing to be getting the wrong data, or the data is in a format that you can't use, or the data is corrupt in some way. So after the planning and direction phase, you're going to start collecting. And as you start collecting, you're going to make sure the data is flowing in from all the different places that you'd like to have it flowing in from. And once it's flowing in, you got to make sure that it's the right data and it's exactly what you were hoping to have in the first place. At that point, then you get a chance to start processing and analyzing the data. And then there is one more key point in this. So once you have your threat intelligence, you've got to disseminate it and share it across all the different parts of the organization that you need to share it to. And that might include parts of the business, that might include parts of different parts of IT or other technology units within your organization. So getting that data into a place where you can actually start to share it out and make use of that data is going to be very important. There are principles of good intelligence here, and I can let you take a look at that slide, but if you're building your own threat intelligence, this is going to be a little more arduous of a process for you to get through, because it's difficult in a lot of these cases to make sure that your intelligence is meeting all of this criteria. What I would say is this: if you're going to go after a third-party threat intelligence feed, which we'll talk about here in a couple minutes, these are some of the things you might want to look for. Check out their process and how they develop their threat intelligence and how they maintain it. Is there a centralized control where they're bringing it all into the same place? Is it responsive, and does it change with the ongoing evolution of the threats and the ongoing evolution of different environments? What are the objectives? Do they avoid bias as they're bringing that information in? Do they constantly beat on it? And do they constantly make sure that it's getting the results that it needs to? Do they share it? And part of sharing it, do they maintain the integrity of the actual source of that data? Is that under continuous review? Is it accessible by everything that it needs to be accessible from? And is it timely? If it's not timely, it's not going to be worth your effort along the way. But this is a process called the Crosscat principles, and you can find it out there all over the internet. It's a great way to evaluate a third-party threat intelligence process and a third-party threat intelligence feed as you might be bringing them into your environment. There are different levels of threat intelligence. So once you end up producing that threat intelligence, you're going to have to start to separate it out so that you can use it most effectively. One level is the strategic level. That's a very plain language type of threat intelligence. It's really kind of a 30,000-foot view, if you will. Focuses mostly on the business risks that are involved with a particular threat, the vulnerability, the intelligence surrounding it. And it's really aimed for your senior leaders, those decision makers, the board members, your executive management teams, et cetera. You're going to not talk to them really on a highly technical level, but you want to get the point across. You want to make them understand that there are true threats out there. We have some vulnerabilities, and we have to do some things to remediate those risks along the way. Another level of threat intelligence is tactical threat intelligence, and that's more tactical in nature. And this is the threat intelligence you're going to give out to the other teams around the organization. And I'll give you an example. At Crown Castle, my security team is one that helps generate policy. We help set the guidelines and the standards for security around the organization. But it doesn't mean that we own all of the security tools. We have different parts of the information technology crew that own the firewalls or the endpoint protection and other different types of security appliances, processes, services, et cetera. They care and feed for it, and we define how the tools should be set up, maintained, and then of course we audit them as well. So we're constantly giving those groups the tactics, the techniques, the procedures to use in order to go get those security tools in place and get everything together the way they need to be in place for the organization to be effectively secure. That gives us the opportunity then to go audit. So we give them very tactical information. It's just enough for them to go do what they need to do. We don't overburden them with a lot of highly tactical things or some more advanced things. We just get them to the point where they can actually help create that protective barrier within and around the organization. And then there is operational threat intelligence. And this is kind of the fun one for different parts of my team. This is very highly tactical information, but it's really thought out to go to figure out, hey, what is the intent, the timing, the sophistication, the groups behind these types of attacks? This is where my threat hunters sit. And those threat hunters are there trying to figure out what's the latest and greatest threat. We're doing dark web searches. We're taking a look in message boards. We're in places where we tell people not to go on a regular basis. And so we don't necessarily go through our corporate line to get there. We have a dirty line, internet access, that we are able to go out and search those areas to see if there's any threat intelligence that we can gain that will help Crown Castle out. You should be doing something similar or have a group doing something similar like that for you. It's very highly tactical, and there's a lot of, I don't want to call it cloak and dagger type stuff, but it's very, some people call it James Bondish, and I'll just leave it at that. It's a lot of fun to be operational on that level of intelligence. And then we use that threat intelligence. We use all of it. We use our tactical, we use our operational, we use our strategic, and we're using that threat intelligence to predict, prevent, detect, and respond. We're looking to affect change across the organization. And the bottom line here is this, for me and my team. We want that ultimate visibility into our network. We want as much as we can have so that we can do as much prediction, prevention, detection that we can get. We want to limit the amount of respond. We're going to be able to respond to the things when we need to, and we have a good incident response program. You should as well. But the key here to our threat intelligence is if we get a lot of visibility into play, then we're going to be able to do a lot of that proactive type activity versus the reactive later on. So as I mentioned a couple minutes earlier, there are sources of threat intelligence that you want to grab. And I know this is a very busy slide, and I got to be honest with you, as I was putting it together, I'm really not good at the smart art, but this is what I came up with anyway. So as I started putting this together, I wanted to show you there's a lot of different sources of data and threat intelligence that you can start to go after. This is where you're going to get a lot of those evolving threats from and really some of that good data that you're going to be able to protect your organization with. And it's everything from, it's things that you've heard of before, I'm sure. Your social media, your message platforms, there's human intelligence that's out there. There's a lot of great threat intelligence agencies out there that have human intelligence. They've got feet on the ground in different places, part of their businesses in different countries or in different hotspots around the globe, and they're picking up threat intelligence that they hear. Malware analysis, indicators of compromise are all over the place. And then there's the deep web and the dark web, and then the client-derived data as well. And you're going to see here in a minute that I'm really interested in that client-derived data across the board, because I think that's where some of our threats are starting to evolve, and evolve big time. So where are the evolving threats coming from? This is what we're seeing on our side. It's always interesting to hear what other people are seeing as well. But you know, you see the one at the top, the oldie but goodie, right? Your internal or your corporate threats and the social engineering. The phishing attacks are coming fast and furious right now. And I know you've probably heard that 1,000 times. When you have a global event like we're having right now, whether that be a holiday, whether that be a terrorist attack, whether it be a pandemic like we're in the middle of, you're going to get a lot of social engineering type attacks. And they come in all different shapes and sizes. I'll talk about one that's not necessarily listed right at the top here, a little ways down the list, but social engineering is big. You see the next bullet point there is digital transformation. And if you're going through a digital transformation, you're going to have some challenges. It's not that digital transformation is a bad thing. It's just that it's a lot of change, and it's hard to keep control of that change as a security professional. And you've got to watch very closely with the threats that may be associated with that. Because as you're going through that digital transformation, somewhere along the line, your organization said, we got to change some things up. And what you don't want them to do is sweep security under the carpet while they're changing things up. So it can be a very challenging time, and it could open up some new vulnerabilities. You've got to look at those vulnerabilities. You've got to make sure that you're addressing those vulnerabilities and managing the threats that could exist with those vulnerabilities. A lot of digital transformation is moving things to the cloud as well, and that really expands your borders out. And as your borders become more and more porous, your internal network is no longer your internal network anymore. Your internal network is everywhere. And you've got to find ways to bring those threats back into the grand scope of your protection, and you've got to figure out what those threats and vulnerabilities are. So be careful with that. Your mobile and your remote workforce, we're seeing all sorts of crazy stuff happen here. Everybody's working from home, and everybody's got their own way of handling things. I will tell you that we're dealing with one of our users right now. Their machine wasn't working right. So what did they do? They picked up their machine, they took it to the local computer shop and had somebody else work on it. And in the process, that somebody else wiped that entire machine. And so now my incident response team has to get into position, start to figure out exactly what happened on that machine, whether or not we lost any data or not. The good news is that we got that machine back over the weekend. We were able to take a look at it. But I mean, users are doing weird stuff. The fact that that person wasn't in the office and wasn't able to hand their machine over to our desktop team and say, here, can you help me out with this and fix it? They just picked it up and took it someplace else, which was pretty out of control. And we were pretty flabbergasted that actually happened. You're going to get those challenges, and it's going to be tougher. And that type of vulnerability really goes on to the vulnerability management as well. I've been told countless times by my IT team, hey, we can't do all the patching that we maybe want to do here because everybody's remote, but we've got to find a way to do it. And so what we have done is found different ways to get that patching accomplished and get ourselves into a position where our machines are just as secure as when they were in the office. And then insider threats. It's tough to talk about, but the bottom line here is this. People are under a lot of stress right now, and your insider threats are going to start to crop up. People need extra money. Maybe in some of your organizations, you've been asked to take a pay cut. Puts financial stress on people. You've got to watch out for those types of threats. Keep those in the back of your mind. Your Internet of Things is really ramping up. 5G is really starting to ramp up right now, so you're going to have a lot more connected items to the network, and so that's going to cause you additional vulnerabilities. The automation of attacks is getting really staggering, and it gets you to the point where those attacks can come fast and furious, and before you know it, they've taken over an entire segment or an entire network, so you've got to be very careful. And reputation-wise, this is a part of that social engineering. This is happening outside of Crown Castle right now, but it's something that we've had to deal with. There are people out there preying on folks that don't have jobs and have lost their employment. They are putting fake Crown Castle job descriptions out there. Now, we can't stop that. There's no way for us to do that. The only thing that we can do, and this is what we've done, is we've posted some information on our site talking about, hey, if you think that it's a Crown Castle job, contact this number. This is who you talk to verify that you're actually applying for a Crown Castle job right now. And so, you know, those are the types of things, if you let them get too far, if you don't take some steps to help protect the folks that are unwitting, that are out there just getting, you know, like I said, preyed upon by really nasty people, that could cause you a reputation ding, and you've got to be careful of those. So my last slide, and I know I'm a little over time here, so I apologize, but managing that threat, how do you manage it? Well, very close to my heart is education. Security awareness training is big, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that right off the top. That should be a standard thing for most everybody is trying to get some sort of security awareness training into their end users, help them understand what the risks are, help them understand what they need to do. But that second bullet point I think is super important right now, especially with a lot of people working from home. If you're in the office, you pretty much probably know where to take your computer. I know in our offices, there are people there that are, you know, there to help. They're going to fix your computer for you, help you get your applications reinstalled, whatever it takes. Away from the office might be different for people. And so you want to make sure that your employees and the people that you're working with, your colleagues, know how to call for help. Help them understand, here are the numbers, this is the email that you communicate with, these are the people that you communicate with. Make sure you educate your people on a very simple thing. Give them their phone number. Give them their lifeline. If you can give them their lifeline, then they're going to be in much better shape, and they're going to be more apt to pick up the phone and call or make that connection to the right individuals in order to get their systems fixed. And then the thing that I want to leave you with and impress most upon you is get the visibility that you need. You want to pull data in from as many different places across your organization as possible, because if you can't see it, you can't effectively manage it. And so if you can't see the risks or the threats, you can't possibly be expected to go after them and fix those. So bring as many data sources in as you possibly can, get that raw data in, start to correlate it up and start to analyze what's going on. Use a combination of threat intelligence engines as well. So you're going to pull in your own threat intelligence, but then you're also going to bring in that commercial one. And most of the time that's going to be something that's connected either to your firewall or to your endpoint protection tool. And then there are some very good open source ones as well. So SANS, of course, is a very good one. I like the OTX, which is the Open Threat Exchange from Alien Vault. Get yourself some automation. So you're going to have a lot of data. So you're going to want some automation to go along with it. Try to work on putting together a good event management package. So bring in a SIM package, like maybe a Splunk or an Alien Vault or something like that, where you can actually correlate all that data together and get some automated results out of it. And then the most important part of visibility is you can have all the automation you want, all the threat intelligence that you want, all the data sources coming in. You got to have some people looking at it. It's not one of those things where you can set it and forget it. You've got to have people looking at it to make sure that you're seeing the right information and that right information is applied the right way within your organization.
So
that
was good.
I'll throw it open to questions. Joe, I'm sorry I took a few extra minutes there. I hope you don't mind.
That was the solidest overview I've ever seen. Speak of, we're a Crown Castle customer, and we actually got a message from your one of your SOCs, your Security Operations Center folks, had to be a couple months ago, and they made us aware of something that we didn't realize, where we don't feel like it was a direct threat at the time, and we weren't compromised in any way, but we were like, oh wow, we didn't even notice this. And they were really on the ball with it. So kudos to your team there for sure. But I think a lot of people are trying to figure this out for themselves, for small companies, large companies. What type of resources or what type of service companies would you kind of direct people out to? I mean, obviously Crown Castle does this and that with the services you provide, but if somebody's out there on the ground that's saying, I need to start focusing on this, where should they start looking?
So I think the first question is, do you have a security team in-house? And if you do, get them start looking in the direction of a SIM product of some sort. And that's going to be some log correlation engine, like I said, like a Splunk or an Alien Vault, maybe a QRadar, something of that nature. You can actually get some very good ones for a decent price, and they're not overly expensive. And so start feeding some data into it and start seeing what's happening. What I would tell you is that when you first start to put a SIM into your network, and a SIM is a security events manager, when you start putting a SIM into your network, you start correlating that data around. You're probably going to find something bouncing around inside that network that you don't want there. Now, it may not be a full-scale breach, but it may be some traffic that you're hoping not to see. So there might be a machine calling home to command and control. It's interesting that you mentioned maybe an announcement. We get those on a regular basis. Being a provider of internet services, there are a lot of times when the FBI communicates with us and says, hey, look, you've got a customer, here's their IP address, that is calling home to a command and control someplace in Russia. So they've got a system that's calling home to a bad server someplace in a bad place. You want to communicate with them and tell them that they need to go take a look at their network. So getting that visibility in is going to be key. If they can't do it themselves and they don't have a security team or they don't have the resources for it, there are a lot of managed security providers that can actually do that for you. And I would be remiss to say, if I didn't say that we are spinning up our own managed security service here in the next couple months.
Nice. That's going to be a pretty interesting conversation. Hey, this is so-and-so from the FBI. We're calling for Rob. and then just having the conversation from there. That's a really interesting start, I imagine. With that, we got a question from one of our members here on Facebook.
Sure.
I'm going to do my best to read word for word. It's from Todd Alpert from Boca Code. And he has a question on managed platforms like Firebase. I assume much of the security is already managed. What considerations should developers using managed platforms consider when not managing their physical infrastructure?
Okay, say the question again. I want to make sure I've got it.
Okay, so on managed platforms like Firebase,
yep.
Assuming much of the security is already managed, what considerations should developers use, or excuse me, what considerations should developers consider when not managing their own physical infrastructures?
Okay, so I think for us, we have a lot of partners that we use, and there are different pieces of the infrastructure that we have managed and we have managed for us. As far as our digital transformation is concerned, that we're doing in-house, and some of the services that we run. I think the thing for us is this: we ask that the partner, whoever the partner is that's managing, follow a certain set of guidelines, and you can ask them to follow the NIST guidelines. There's CIS that is out there, Center for Internet Security, that has security standards. I really like the Center for Internet Security standards. They're simple, they're straightforward. They have a nice questionnaire that you can run your partner through or your provider through to say, hey, listen, do you meet these criteria? It starts to give you that sense of, hey, are they really doing the things that they're supposed to be doing with my data or the connection into my network and into my data? I think then the other thing that you want to make sure of is that you run spot checks on a regular basis with them. Get to the point where you can actually do some audits of what they're actually doing for you and taking a look at some of their security controls. Have them show you their NIST certification if they've got one, or their SOC 1 or SOC 2 certification if they've got them. These are the things that you want to follow up on. When you give control away, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It can become a bad thing if you're not doing your due diligence and then following up on that carrier.
Gotcha. So Todd also commented that he used the word manage maybe a few too many times in that question. So that would explain probably why I got tripped up on it, and so did yourself.
No, that's all right.
Well, Rob, we're at about 40 minutes here. I wanted to thank you for your time and for going through all this. I mean, it was very, very thorough presentation. Obviously, I would assume there's a lot of uptick in your work now that's we're in this odd era we're in, but curious if you have any closing thoughts just to leave us with before we go.
I think the biggest thing is keep your eyes open. The bottom line is that the second you let your guard down a little bit, that's when something will sneak in, and that visibility is super important. Make sure you continue to have that visibility across your environment and keep fighting for more visibility. The more you've got, the more you can see what's going on, and the more you can see those threats coming.
Speak of, I was just looking around to make sure my cats weren't sneaking up to attack me. So I'm going to keep a weather eye open based off of that. So thank you very much.
Very good.
Thanks for sharing today, Rob. I appreciate it. And look forward to working more with Ground Castle and seeing what you guys keep working on up there. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for the time. Appreciate it.